I gave everything to him, convinced that our love was destined to be. But when he chose Sarah, a woman who only wanted him for his money and left me on altar, I married someone else. Seeing me living happy with other man he regrets. It's funny really. I always thought that if I ever fell in love, I'd know the moment it happened. That there'd be a dramatic moment, something grand, like fireworks or a choir of angels, or even just some whispering wind that would sweep me off my feet. But now, as I sit on the edge of my bed and replay the events of the past few weeks, I realize how much I've missed it. The truth is, I've been in love with Eric for a long time, longer than I'd care to admit. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It just sort of happened. Somewhere between laughing at ridiculous inside jokes, sharing late-night talks about everything and nothing, and the way he always knows how to make me feel better when I'm down, I found my heart slowly leaning toward him. I didn't even see it coming, but here I am, staring out the window, waiting for him to text or call or knock on my door, like he always does, and realizing I don't need fireworks to feel this. All I need is Eric. I glance at my phone for the 100th time today, half expecting a message. He hasn't reached out yet, which is unusual. Usually it's a quick, "Hey, you free later?" or a meme that only the two of us would find funny. He doesn't even need to say much. He doesn't have to. Just the fact that he reaches out means the world to me. I smile a little as I think of him. Eric. I can't think of anyone else who could make me feel the way I do when I'm with him. It's not the kind of love you read about in stories, with sweeping declarations or passionate kisses. No, ours is the kind of love that feels like comfort, like sitting in a coffee shop, him telling me about his day, and me listening in a way that feels almost too intimate for words. It's in the way our hands brush when we pass something to each other, or how we can go weeks without seeing each other, but pick up right where we left off without missing a beat. He's my best friend. But somewhere along the way, he became so much more than that. I'd always told myself that our friendship was enough. That if I just focused on that, the connection we had, the trust, the support, I'd be happy. And I really was. But sometimes, especially when I see the way other people look at each other, it hits me all at once. What if he doesn't feel the same? What if I'm just a friend to him? What if I'm overthinking this whole thing? I can't shake the nervous pit in my stomach. I think about the last time we hung out. It was the usual, a quiet dinner at his place, just the two of us. We talked about everything under the sun, and then we watched some cheesy action movie because he knew I liked them even though he thought they were ridiculous. It felt like a perfect night, but as I got up to leave, I saw him glance at me in a way that made my heart skip. His eyes lingered just for a second longer than usual. Was that something? I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm just desperate to see signs that he feels the same way. But I can't help it. I wish I could tell him. I wish I could say the words I've been holding inside for months now. But what if it ruins everything? What if it changes everything? What if he doesn't feel the same? I think back to the countless times he's been there for me, not just as a friend, but as someone who genuinely cares. There are moments when I feel so seen, so understood by him, that I can't help but believe we're on the same wavelength. I remember last week, when I was having one of those days, the kind where everything seems to go wrong. He just showed up at my door, a large coffee in one hand and a fresh batch of cookies in the other. He didn't ask, didn't pry. He just sat with me, talked, and let me vent until I felt like myself again. In that moment, I realized how lucky I was to have him in my life. But it also made something else clear. I don't just want him as my best friend. I want him in a way that feels deeper, more intimate. I want to be the one he confides in, the one he holds close, the one he loves. It's terrifying to admit, but it's true. I stare at my phone again. No messages. Nothing from Eric. But there's a part of me that knows he's thinking of me. Even if he hasn't sent a text yet. Even if he's just sitting in his own room, probably doing the same thing I am, wondering whether to make a move or leave everything the way it is. Maybe one of us should say something. Maybe it's time to stop pretending this is just a friendship. But then again, what if we do? What if we take that step and it changes everything? Maybe it's too much to ask, but maybe it's not. It's strange how quickly things can change. 1 minute, everything feels familiar, like a favorite song you can't help but sing along to. The next minute, it's like someone hit the pause button and everything you thought you understood falls apart in slow motion. That's how it felt when Sarah came into our lives. It wasn't anything dramatic at first. She was just this new girl in town, a friend of a friend, someone we all met through mutual acquaintances. But something about her made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way she laughed at all of Eric's jokes, as if they were the funniest things she'd ever heard. Or maybe it was the way she always seemed to be standing just a little too close to him, her hand resting on his arm, her eyes lingering a little too long. At first, I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I mean, it wasn't like Eric and I were anything more than friends, right? It wasn't like I had any claim over him. But that's the thing about feelings, they don't listen to logic. They don't care that we've been friends for years, that I've shared parts of myself with him that I've never shared with anyone else. They just do what they want, whether you're ready or not. And lately, those feelings have been getting harder and harder to ignore. It was late one evening when it hit me, when I realized just how deep my feelings for Eric had grown. We were sitting at the usual spot in our favorite cafe, sipping on coffee and talking about nothing important, when Sarah walked in. She didn't see us right away, but I noticed her almost immediately. She looked stunning, effortlessly beautiful, like someone who had just stepped out of a magazine. She caught Eric's eye as she passed by, and I swear, I saw his expression change in an instant. His smile grew wider, and for the first time in weeks, I saw that spark in his eyes, the kind that I'd always hoped was reserved for me. It shouldn't have hurt. It shouldn't have felt like someone just dropped a weight on my chest. But it did. "Hey, Elisa," Eric said, his voice almost absent as he waved her over. I watched, a little too intently, as she walked toward us, her presence immediately filling the space. "Hey, Eric, Elisa." Sarah greeted us with her bright smile. "I didn't expect to see you here. Mind if I join you?" "Of course," Eric said quickly, motioning for her to take a seat. He scooted his chair closer to mine without even realizing it, and I could feel the tension in my body as Sarah sat down, close enough that her knee brushed against his. I forced a smile, hoping they couldn't see the ache in my chest. The way my heart was pounding so loudly, I thought it might give me away. "So, what's new?" Sarah asked, turning to Eric as if she had all the time in the world. I watched as he leaned in, his eyes lighting up with every word he spoke to her. It wasn't like he didn't look at me that way, but this felt different. This felt like something more. And just like that, I realized something I hadn't been able to admit to myself before. Eric didn't see me the way I saw him. He didn't feel the same pull, the same depth. The connection we had, the easy friendship, wasn't something that could easily be turned into love. And as much as I had wanted to believe otherwise, maybe it had never been more than that, just friendship. But Sarah, she was different. She was something he could fall in love with. The way she spoke, the way she looked at him, it was as if she understood him in a way I couldn't. She wasn't just a girl he hung out with. She was someone he could see himself with. I could tell. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, feeling the weight of the situation settling heavily on my shoulders. I forced myself to focus on the conversation, to be a part of it, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking. That night, after Sarah left, Eric turned to me, a wide grin on his face. "She's really cool, huh? I think we're gonna hang out again soon." "Yeah," I said, my voice surprisingly tight. "She seems great." Eric didn't notice the subtle shift in my tone. He didn't notice how my heart was cracking under the pressure of pretending to be happy for him. He didn't notice because, in his eyes, she was everything he needed right now. The thing was, I didn't hate Sarah. I didn't want to be petty or resentful, but it didn't make it any easier to watch him fall for her, to see how naturally they fit together, while I remained just the girl he called his best friend. It was getting harder to keep pretending everything was fine, to keep telling myself that it didn't matter if he loved her, that I was okay just being his friend. But how could I be okay with that? How could I keep watching as the person I wanted most in the world slipped away from me? I didn't know what I was supposed to do, so I did the only thing I could think of. I withdrew. I didn't call him as often, didn't text him with the same casual ease we used to share. I found myself pulling away, needing space to breathe, to think, to accept that maybe my love for Eric would never be returned the way I wanted it to be. But what hurt more than anything was knowing that I couldn't even tell him how I felt. I couldn't even let him know that I loved him, because the truth was too big, too painful, and I was scared that if I did, I'd lose him forever. So, I stayed quiet, hiding my feelings behind the facade of friendship, pretending like everything was fine. But nothing felt fine anymore. I should have known. I should have seen the signs, the little things that didn't add up, The way Sarah's charm always seemed to have a hint of something else behind it. But I was too focused on my own pain, too caught up in the idea that I had somehow lost Eric to see what was really happening. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks, and it didn't take long for me to realize what was happening. Sarah wasn't just interested in Eric. She wasn't just some sweet girl who happened to catch his eye. No, Sarah had an agenda, one that had been carefully planned from the moment she set foot in our lives. She wasn't looking for love. She was looking for security, for status, for a way out of her broken, struggling life. It all started when I overheard a conversation between Sarah and one of her friends at a cafe, her voice low and quick, as if she didn't want anyone to hear. I was at a table nearby, pretending to be absorbed in my phone, but my ears were straining to catch the words. "You don't understand," Sarah was saying, her voice sharp with tension. "His family is rich. His parents are never going to approve of me. I'm not what they want for him. But if I can get close enough, if I can make him fall for me, then I can get what I need. I can have the life I've always dreamed of." I froze. My heart sank as the truth settled in. I hadn't wanted to believe it, but now I knew for sure. Sarah wasn't in love with Eric. She didn't care about him in the way I thought she did. She was after his money, after the life that came with being a part of his wealthy family. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to ask her why she was doing this, why she was using him like this. But before I could move, I heard something else that made my blood run cold. "I can't let Elisa stand in the way," Sarah continued, her tone turning malicious. "She's the only thing keeping him from me. If I play my cards right, I can make her look like the bad guy. I can make Eric think she's the reason I'm breaking up with him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just about Eric anymore. This was about her scheme to manipulate everyone around her and to destroy the friendship Eric and I had spent years building. Before I could process everything, Sarah stood up abruptly, her eyes glancing in my direction for a second too long. She knew I was there. She knew I had heard everything. And just like that, she smiled, as if she'd won, as if everything was going according to plan. The next few days were a blur. I didn't know what to say to Eric, didn't know how to warn him. He was still so wrapped up in Sarah, still so enchanted by her that I didn't even know where to start. The guilt I felt for not telling him sooner gnawed at me, but what could I do? How could I possibly tell him that the girl he was falling for was using him? Then one evening, Sarah made her move. She came to Eric's place, her face tight with distress. She looked like she'd been crying, her eyes red and puffy, and I could tell something was off the second I saw her. Eric, always the kind-hearted soul, immediately wrapped his arms around her, comforting her like he always did. "I can't do this anymore, Eric," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't be with you. Your family, they don't want me. They don't accept me for who I am, and it's tearing me apart." Eric looked stricken, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "My parents love you. They're just a little protective. They'll warm up to you, just give it time." "No," Sarah said, shaking her head. "It's not just that. I can't live in a world where I'm always second place. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when they'll never accept me. And Elisa, she's the one who's been pushing me away. She's the one who's been whispering things in your ear. She's the one making this harder than it has to be." My heart stopped. Eric looked at me in disbelief, his gaze shifting from Sarah to me, as if trying to piece everything together. Elisa?" His voice wavered. Sarah's words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. "Yes, she's been jealous from the start, Eric. She's always wanted you for herself, but she can't have you. So, she's been telling you things, planting doubt in your mind. She's the one who's been driving us apart." My breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of Sarah's manipulation bearing down on me. She was playing him, playing us both. But I couldn't let it stand. I couldn't let her turn this around on me. "Sarah," I said, my voice cold but steady. "This isn't about me. This is about you. You've been using Eric, pretending to be someone you're not. You're not breaking up with him because of his family. You're breaking up with him because you know you can't have him, not the way you want him. And you're trying to make me the villain because you're scared of being rejected." Sarah's eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. "You think anyone would believe you over me, Elisa? You think Eric would listen to your lies?" Eric's gaze flickered between the two of us, his confusion growing deeper. "What's going on? What are you both talking about?" Before I could respond, Sarah stepped forward, wiping her eyes as if she were the one who'd been wronged. I'm sorry, Eric. I can't keep pretending. I need to move on. And you need to stop letting Elisa control you. She's the one who's been keeping us apart all along. And just like that, she turned and walked out, leaving me standing there with Eric, the tension thick in the room. Eric stared at the door where she'd just left, his expression lost. Elisa, did you? I didn't do anything, I said quietly, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. Sarah's lying to you. She's been using you this whole time. And now she's trying to make me the reason she's walking away. Eric didn't say anything at first. He just stared at me, as if trying to make sense of everything. I wanted to reach out, to explain everything, to make him see the truth, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. The seed of suspicion Sarah had planted had already begun to take root, and once it took hold, I knew it would be almost impossible to pull it out. The games people play, I never expected to be a part of one, but somehow here I was, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending everything would be okay. The days that followed were nothing short of suffocating. Eric couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. I could see it in the way his eyes darted around, as if searching for something that was no longer there. The texts, the calls, none of them went through. No reply, no explanation, just silence. It was maddening. We were sitting on the couch at his place, the space between us thick with tension. I could tell he hadn't slept well the past few nights. He'd barely eaten. And I, the person who had always been there for him, the one who had stood by him through every up and down, was now nothing more than a shadow in the background. He barely noticed when I brought him food. He barely noticed when I asked if he was okay. All he could think about was Sarah. Why won't she answer? Eric muttered, his fingers gripping the edge of his phone as if it might somehow magically make Sarah respond. I didn't have the heart to tell him what I already knew, that she wasn't coming back. Not after what she'd done. She's not going to pick up, Eric, I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. She's made her choice. He didn't hear me. His hands began to shake with frustration, his face pale as he stared at the screen, waiting for something, anything, to show up. His lips moved, but no words came out. It was as if he were caught in a loop, unable to break free from the idea that Sarah's absence was something he could fix, that if he just tried harder, everything would go back to the way it was. I knew better. I just don't get it. Eric suddenly exploded, slamming his phone down on the coffee table with a force that made me jump. His face was flushed, eyes wild with a mix of anger and confusion. She can't just disappear. She can't just leave like that. I stayed quiet, my heart breaking for him, but also for myself, because I knew he couldn't see what was right in front of him. He couldn't see that Sarah had never been the person he thought she was. She'd been using him, manipulating him all along. But now, he was drowning in this desperate need to fix things that didn't need fixing. Eric, I said gently, my voice barely above a whisper. She's gone. She's made it clear. You need to let her go. His eyes snapped to me, filled with an intensity that took me by surprise. Don't you dare say that to me, Elisa, he shouted, his voice raw, breaking with the weight of his frustration. You don't get it. I can't just let her go. I can't lose her like this. I flinched, the sting of his words hitting me like a slap in the face. It hurt, of course it hurt, but I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at the situation. Angry at Sarah for playing with his heart. Angry at myself for still being here, still trying to fix something that maybe I couldn't. I'm not asking you to forget about her, I said, my voice trembling with the effort to stay calm. But you need to understand that sometimes people make choices. She made hers, and you have to accept that, Eric. You have to move on. But I could see that he wasn't listening. He wasn't ready to hear me. I can't just accept it. Eric yelled, standing up, his hands fisted at his sides. She's gone, and I don't even know why. I don't know what happened, what I did wrong. And now I'm just supposed to let it go like it doesn't matter? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself as I watched him unravel before me. He wasn't angry with me, I knew that, but it still felt like a slap in the face. Still, I stayed. I had always stayed. Eric, listen to me, I said, standing up slowly, my voice soft but firm. Sometimes things fall apart, even when we don't understand why. But you can't chase someone who doesn't want to be caught. You can't make someone love you if they've already made up their mind. He froze, staring at me, his chest rising and falling with each labored breath. The words hit him harder than I thought they would. I saw the anger fade from his face, replaced by a hollow look of defeat. "I don't know how to do that," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to let her go, Elisa." I stepped closer, my heart aching for him. "I know, but you have to try." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He sat back down, his shoulders slumped, staring at the floor. I felt a pang of guilt. Was I doing the right thing? Was I really helping him, or just pushing him further into a place of pain? But then I remembered something I'd always known about myself. I loved him, and I couldn't just walk away, not when he needed me the most. Even if it hurt, even if it was breaking me, too. I stayed by his side. The next few days were filled with moments of silence, moments where I could see the weight of Sarah's absence bearing down on him. He wasn't calling her anymore. Not after the way she'd rejected him, but I could tell he was still lost in the hurt, the confusion, the pain. I spent those days with him, letting him talk when he needed to, staying quiet when he didn't. I cooked meals for him, kept the space between us comfortable, and tried to be the friend he needed, even though every part of me wanted to scream out how I felt, wanted to tell him that I was still here, still willing to fight for him. But I didn't, because at the end of the day, I couldn't force him to see what was right in front of him. I couldn't make him realize that the person he was looking for was already here. And I knew it was only a matter of time before the hurt from Sarah's departure faded for him. But when it did, when the dust settled, where would that leave me? Would I still be standing here, silently loving him, still trying to fix what had already broken? I didn't know, but I couldn't walk away now, not when he needed me most. So I stayed, quietly devoted, watching from the sidelines, waiting for the day when maybe, just maybe, he would see me. For now, though, I kept my place. I stayed. It's strange, the way life can change in an instant, the way everything can shatter with just one sentence. I had known, deep down, that this day was coming. I had known for a long time that Eric wasn't in love with me, that the engagement had always been a product of pressure from his parents, from my family, from the world around us. We were two people stuck in a story we hadn't written. But I had convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, he'd come around. Maybe he'd learn to love me. After all, we had spent years together. We were good friends, weren't we? But I was wrong. I should have known when he started to pull away, when his eyes wandered whenever we were together, when the small, shared moments of affection, the laughter, the late-night talks, the glances that once spoke volumes, began to disappear. It wasn't that he was mean. He was never cruel, never intentionally hurtful. But in those little moments I saw it, the distance, the coldness, the indifference, and yet I stayed, because I loved him. I always had, even if he couldn't see me, even if he didn't love me the way I wanted him to. So when Eric invited me out to the bar that night, I went, not expecting anything spectacular, but hoping that maybe this time he would see me. Maybe this time he would feel something real. But what happened that night would forever be etched into my heart as the moment everything truly ended. It was a typical bar, dimly lit, loud with laughter, the clink of glasses, the buzz of people lost in their own worlds. Eric and his friends were already there when I arrived, scattered around a large table in the corner. They waved me over, and I hesitated for a moment, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in my stomach. I tried to smile, to look casual, to look like I wasn't about to face a reality that had been creeping up on me for years. When I reached the table, Eric was surrounded by a group of his closest friends. They all knew me, of course. We'd been through high school and college together. But tonight, something felt different. They all greeted me with that forced, polite smile, the one you wear when you don't know what to say. I slid into the empty seat next to Eric, and for a moment, I thought maybe he would put his arm around me, or maybe he'd look at me with the affection I had always hoped was still there. But instead, he barely glanced in my direction. He was too busy laughing with his friends, his attention elsewhere, his eyes wandering. I felt small, invisible. It was as if I wasn't even there. The conversation continued around me, but the words were muffled, distant. I tried to engage, tried to laugh along with the jokes, tried to be the happy, supportive fiancé, but it wasn't working. I could feel the heaviness in the air, the unspoken distance between us. And I knew then, more than ever, that we were living in two completely different worlds. That's when Eric's friend, Mark, leaned over with a grin and nudged Eric playfully. "So, man, 7 days, huh? Big day coming up. How are you feeling?" The question was lighthearted, casual, but the tone in Mark's voice made my heart stop. I knew what he was getting at. I knew what they all thought of our engagement. Eric turned to him with a small, detached smile. "Honestly," he said, his voice low but loud enough for everyone at the table to hear, "I'm not feeling anything. I'm marrying her because it's expected, because our parents want it, but love? No, I don't love her. I never have." The words hit me like a slap. It was as if everything around me froze. The chatter, the laughter, the music, it all faded into nothing. All I could hear was Eric's voice, cold and indifferent, cutting through the air like a knife. "I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do," he continued, his eyes not meeting mine. "I'll go through the motions. I'll marry her, but I'll never love her. So, Elisa, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but it's time to face the truth. We're not meant to be." The world tilted, and I thought I might fall off my seat. I felt as though the ground beneath me had cracked open, the earth swallowing me whole. My chest tightened, my breath catching in my throat. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to shout at him, to make him feel what I was feeling, but my voice wouldn't come. Instead, I sat there, paralyzed, as his friends, the ones who knew me, the ones who had seen us together for years, nodded in agreement, their eyes flickering with sympathy and pity. Eric turned back to the group, laughing as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just crushed my heart in front of everyone. But I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't bear to see him, to hear him. So I stood up, my hands trembling, my vision blurred by the hot sting of tears. "Excuse me," I choked out, my voice shaking. "I need to go." I turned and walked away, not waiting for anyone to stop me, not waiting for Eric to call after me. I didn't care anymore. I couldn't bear to hear another word. The door to the bar swung open, and the cool night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. I couldn't feel anything except the emptiness in my chest, the weight of his words crushing me. I walked, aimless, through the streets, my mind reeling, my heart in pieces. The city around me was alive, but I felt like a ghost, invisible to the world. I had spent years believing that somehow Eric would choose me, that he would see me for who I was, that love would find a way. But now I saw the truth that had been staring me in the face for so long. He didn't love me. He never had. I was just a placeholder, a decision made by two sets of parents who thought we were a good match. I wasn't the love of his life. I was just the person he was going to marry because he had no other choice. I don't know how long I walked. I don't remember how I got home. All I knew was that when I finally reached my apartment, I was completely empty, completely hollow. The wedding was 7 days away, and for the first time in years, I knew in my soul that it would never happen. At least, not the way I had imagined it, not the way I had hoped. But even as I stood there, heartbroken and shattered, one thought lingered. I still loved him. The day had come, the day that was supposed to be the start of forever. I stood before the mirror, my reflection staring back at me, a girl who was dressed in a beautiful gown, her hair carefully done, her makeup perfect. The venue was stunning, a grand ballroom with shimmering lights, soft white flowers hanging from the ceiling, and a soft melody floating through the air. It was everything I had ever imagined for a wedding. A wedding to Eric, the man I had spent the last 4 years loving, the man I thought I would marry. And yet, here I was, standing in this beautiful place, surrounded by people, but all I felt was a deep, gnawing emptiness. I should have been overjoyed. I should have been feeling like the luckiest woman in the world. The preparations had been extensive, the excitement was palpable, and the smiles of family and friends should have filled me with warmth. But instead, there was a strange stillness in my heart, a quiet voice in the back of my mind that had been growing louder with each passing minute. Eric hadn't arrived yet. I glanced at the clock. He was not just a little late, but absent. He was supposed to be here, standing beside me, ready to begin this new chapter. But there was no sign of him. I tried to brush off the uneasy feeling creeping up inside me. After all, it was just nerves, right? Maybe he was just caught up in some last-minute detail. Maybe there was something simple holding him back. But as the minutes ticked by, the anxiety slowly began to swell, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The guests were starting to murmur, some trying to make small talk to pass the time, others looking at their watches, their expressions flickering with confusion. The music, once soft and romantic, began to feel like an uncomfortable soundtrack to the growing tension in the room. I could see the concerned glances exchanged between my parents and Eric's, their faces tight with worry. And then came the whispers. Has anyone heard from Eric? Where is he? Is he okay? Do you think he's just nervous? The questions bounced around the room like echoes, but no one had answers. No one knew where Eric was. I wanted to run to the phone, to call him, to hear his voice, to understand why he wasn't here. But I couldn't move. I stood frozen in place, my heart pounding, a storm of emotions swirling in my chest. Maybe we should try calling again, one of Eric's friends suggested nervously, picking up his phone and dialing his number for the 10th time. But still, nothing. Minutes passed like hours. My legs began to feel weak, my mind racing with possibilities. Had something happened to him? Was he okay? Was he even coming at all? But then, something happened. One of the wedding planners walked over to my parents, her face pale, her eyes wide with distress. They exchanged a few quiet words, but it was enough for me to feel the knot of fear tighten in my chest. The planner turned to me, her voice trembling as she spoke. Elisa, I'm sorry. We've just received some news. Eric, he's not coming. The words didn't make sense at first. They didn't register. Not in the way that reality does when it crashes down on you, breaking everything you thought you knew. I blinked, unable to comprehend. What do you mean he's not coming? I asked, my voice small, as if saying the words would make them less real. She hesitated, glancing at the floor before continuing. He went to see someone. Someone from his past. Sarah. She came back. She's in town, and Eric, he left to go to her. A cold rush of shock flooded through me. My stomach twisted violently. It was as though the world had suddenly stopped spinning. I felt my knees buckle beneath me, but somehow I didn't fall. My breath came in shallow, frantic gasps. Sarah. She was the one person I had never thought about, the one person who had haunted my every insecurity, my every doubt. Why was she back now? Why now, on the day we were supposed to marry? The silence in the room was suffocating. Everyone had heard the news. My parents' faces were masks of disbelief, trying to process what they were being told. Eric's friends looked uncomfortable, like they had all known something I hadn't, that there was more to this story than I had ever realized. I felt the weight of the moment bearing down on me, crushing every ounce of hope, of expectation, of love that I had carried with me for all these years. Eric had left me. He had chosen her. The wedding planner's voice faded into the background, and I could no longer hear the soft murmurs of the guests, the concerned voices of my family. All I could hear was the deafening beat of my own heart, racing, wild, frantic as I tried to understand how this was happening. How everything was falling apart in front of me. I thought I knew him. I thought we had a future together. I thought he was the one who would be there, standing beside me, ready to share our lives. But instead, he had chosen to walk away. He had chosen Sarah. The one person who had always been a shadow between us, the one person who had always made me question everything about our relationship. And now, here she was, taking him from me, taking my future. In an instant, all the dreams I had been holding onto shattered. The gown, the venue, the people, it all became meaningless. None of it mattered. Because the one person who was supposed to love me, who was supposed to stand by me, had abandoned me without a second thought. My vision blurred, and I realized, with a sickening jolt, that the tears I had been holding back had begun to fall. Slowly at first, then harder, until they were streaming down my face. Mom, Dad, I choked out, but the words stuck in my throat. I could hear them, faintly, calling for me, but I couldn't respond. I couldn't look at them, couldn't stand to see their pity, their concern. I couldn't bear to look at anyone right now. All I could feel was the hollow ache of betrayal, the sharp sting of being left behind. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over me, and I swayed, clutching the edge of the table to steady myself. How had this happened? How had I let myself fall so far, so deep, into a love that wasn't real? But it didn't matter. It didn't matter anymore. The man I loved, the man I thought I would spend my life with, was gone. And Sarah, of all people, had taken him away. I had been nothing but a shadow in his life, a placeholder in a story that was never mine to begin with. And now, there was nothing left. The wedding was over before it even started. The waiting room was silent, the door closing behind me with a soft click, shutting out the sounds of the world, the murmurs of confusion, the shocked whispers, the pitying glances. Inside the room, it was just me and the broken fragments of everything I had believed in. I walked across the room, each step heavy, as if the weight of everything, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the humiliation, was pulling me down. I reached the far wall, my back pressed against it, and slid down to sit on the floor, my legs folding beneath me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't feel anything except the deep, aching pain in my chest. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I wasn't supposed to be here, in this room, alone. Not on the day I had imagined would be the beginning of my happily ever after. The man I had given my heart to, the one I had devoted so much of myself to, had chosen someone else. But then, as I sat there, my hands clenched tightly together, a thought crept into my mind. A quiet voice that grew louder with each passing second. It wasn't him I needed anymore. It wasn't Eric. It was me. I wasn't going to let him do this to me. I wasn't going to let him walk away and leave me broken, humiliated, in front of everyone. I wasn't going to be the woman left standing in a beautiful dress with no one to take her hand. Not today. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, wiping the tears from my face with the back of my hand. My reflection in the mirror across the room showed a woman who was shattered. Yes, but also a woman who was still breathing. A woman who still had the power to choose. And in that moment, I made my choice. I was done. Done with waiting. Done with hoping. Done with being second best. Done with loving someone who didn't love me the same way. I was going to move forward. I was going to take control of my own future. And I wasn't going to let Eric or anyone else dictate how I lived my life. With trembling hands, I stood up. My knees were weak, but I didn't care. I had made a decision, and that was all that mattered now. I straightened my back, fixing the hem of my gown, wiping away the last traces of tears, and walked toward the door with one singular purpose in mind. I wasn't going to let this day end in defeat. I was going to marry, but it wouldn't be to Eric. It couldn't be. Not after everything. I stepped back into the ballroom, and all eyes turned to me, including my parents, my friends, and even Eric's. They were all staring, waiting for some explanation, some understanding of what was happening. But there was no time for explanations. There was no time for words. The only thing I knew in that moment was that I had to do something, anything, to prove to myself that I was more than the woman he had left behind. Everyone, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the chaos inside my chest. I know this may come as a shock, but the wedding is not going to happen as planned. The room fell silent, the air thick with disbelief. I felt my pulse racing, but I refused to falter. This was my moment. I will not be humiliated like this, I declared, my voice rising with strength. I won't be the woman left behind, the one who clings to someone who doesn't love her. I won't be a shadow in anyone's life anymore. I turned to my father, then my mother, their faces frozen in shock. But I could see the pride in their eyes, even as they struggled to process my words. I am going to marry today, but it will not be Eric. It will be someone who chooses me, someone who sees me for who I am. There was a hushed murmur among the guests, and my heart raced as I felt the weight of every gaze on me. But then, through the crowd, a man stepped forward. A tall, confident figure who had been standing silently near the back of the room. Ethan. I knew him. I'd met him several times over the past few months at various social events. A successful businessman with a quiet intensity about him. He wasn't a stranger to me, but we had never shared more than pleasantries and casual conversations. Yet, in that moment, he was exactly what I needed. Ethan walked toward me with purposeful strides, his dark eyes meeting mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something in his gaze, a promise. A promise of something new, something unexpected. "I'll marry you, Elisa," he said, his voice calm and steady, but with an undeniable undercurrent of sincerity. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at him, not knowing what to say at first. There was no time to think about the past, no time to question the sudden choice. All I knew was that this moment, right here, was mine to take. Ethan reached out his hand to me, and I didn't hesitate. I placed my hand in his, feeling the warmth of his touch, and for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of something other than heartache. "I don't know where this will go," I said, my voice trembling but strong, "but I'm choosing to move forward. I'm choosing to let go of the past." Ethan nodded, his expression one of quiet understanding. "Then let's do this, Elisa. Let's start something new." Without another word, we turned to face the officiant, and the guests gathered around us, their confusion slowly giving way to a stunned silence. I could feel their eyes on us, the shock, the disbelief, but I didn't care. This was my choice. This was my future. Ethan and I stood together, and as the ceremony began, I let go of everything I had once believed about love. I let go of the dreams I had built with Eric. I let go of the woman I had been before. In that moment, I felt free. And as Ethan's hand gripped mine tightly, as we exchanged vows not built on years of history, but on the possibility of what could be, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the future wasn't so broken after all. Maybe this was how it was supposed to be. The night that followed the unexpected wedding felt like a dream. A strange, surreal mix of emotions, both heavy and light, all rolled into one. Ethan's house was far more than what I'd imagined. It was modern, sleek, and tastefully decorated, the kind of place you could only dream of stepping into. But none of the grandeur caught my attention as much as the way Ethan treated me. His quiet confidence, the calm reassurance in his eyes, and the way he respected my space. We didn't speak much as we made our way into his home after the brief but intimate ceremony. There was no rush, no desperate need to fill the silence with words. His presence was enough. His steady gaze, his careful movements, everything he did conveyed respect. There was no expectation, no pressure. Just a man who was giving me space to breathe and process, even after the whirlwind of emotions I had just gone through. Once inside, Ethan showed me to a guest room. I could tell he'd planned this. It was a simple room, but it was comfortable, inviting, a place to unwind. After a quiet dinner of light food he'd prepared, we both went our separate ways for the night, and yet, in a way, it didn't feel like separation at all. The unspoken understanding between us felt natural. As I lay in bed that night, thoughts swirling in my head, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long: peace. I wasn't waiting for someone else's love. I wasn't clinging to something that would never be. I wasn't desperate anymore. I had made my choice. Ethan wasn't Eric. He wasn't the man I had spent years trying to mold myself around. But in this moment, I realized that maybe that was the best thing of all. He was who I needed now, a person who saw me, respected me, and made no demands. The night passed quietly, and as morning light began to filter through the curtains, I felt a sense of clarity. I had made my decision. I would devote myself to this new path, to Ethan, without looking back. It was a commitment, yes, but it was also freedom. The next morning was surprisingly calm. Ethan had already risen, and there was an air of warmth and comfort in his home that hadn't been there the night before. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and he had set up breakfast, simple yet thoughtful. The warmth in his gestures, the care he showed, felt so natural that it took me a moment to realize how different it was from the coldness I had once known. As I sat down at the table, Ethan joined me, his expression thoughtful but kind. "I know this is all sudden," he began, his voice gentle but firm, "and I don't expect anything from you. But I want you to know, Elisa, that I respect you. I see what you've gone through, and I don't take that lightly." His words meant more than he could understand. For the first time in a long time, someone was acknowledging my pain without trying to rush through it or fix it. There was no judgment, no questions. Only understanding. "Thank you, Ethan," I said softly, my voice steady. "For everything. For not rushing me. For respecting where I am in all of this." He smiled, that quiet but reassuring smile that made me feel safe. "There's no rush, Elisa. You don't have to rush into anything. But I am here. I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, I knew, truly knew, that I had made the right decision. Ethan wasn't a quick fix or a rebound. He was someone who saw me as I was, someone who respected me in a way that felt like a breath of fresh air. Later that day, we drove to meet Ethan's parents. They lived not far from his house, in a beautiful countryside home that was warm and inviting. The moment we arrived, his mother and father greeted me with open arms. There was no coldness, no formality. They were kind, welcoming, and, to my surprise, genuinely happy to meet me. His mother, a woman in her late 50s with soft gray hair and warm brown eyes, immediately embraced me as if I were a long-lost friend. "It's so lovely to finally meet you, Elisa," she said, her voice warm and melodic. "Ethan speaks so highly of you." His father, a tall, dignified man with a sharp yet approachable presence, smiled at me as well. "I've heard a lot about you, Elisa." Ethan doesn't usually talk much about his personal life, but when he does, it's clear he cares. I felt myself relaxing in their presence. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't an outsider, but part of something. Something real. Ethan's family, like Ethan himself, was grounded in a way that felt stable and secure. Over lunch, conversation flowed easily. His mother asked about my interests, my work, and how I had ended up in the situation I was in. There were no awkward pauses or uncomfortable questions. They simply listened. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe without fear of judgment. As we ate, I realized something. Ethan's parents weren't just accepting me because of their son. They were accepting me because they saw me for who I was. They were kind, understanding, and truly interested in me, not just as Ethan's wife, but as Elisa. The woman I was, not the broken girl who had been left behind by someone else. "I'm glad Ethan found you," his father said, a genuine smile on his face. "You seem like someone who has a good heart." Those words, simple but sincere, struck me deeply. It had been so long since someone had said something like that to me. I had spent so much time questioning my worth, my place in the world, that hearing this from Ethan's father felt like a balm to my soul. After the meal, we took a stroll around the garden, and it was then that I realized that this was what I needed. This calm, this warmth, this feeling of belonging. Later that evening, our families met at Ethan's house for dinner. It was a casual gathering, no grand speeches or formalities. Just two families coming together to share a meal, to get to know one another. My parents were still processing everything, of course, but they were kind to Ethan and his family. There was a sense of tentative acceptance, a recognition that, although this was an unconventional way for everything to unfold, there was a genuine connection between us. As we all sat around the dinner table, laughing and talking as if we had known each other for years, I realized that this was what I had been waiting for. Not just love, not just security, but a sense of true partnership. A relationship built on respect, understanding, and shared values. Ethan's hand brushed mine under the table, and I glanced at him. His gaze met mine, and in that moment, I felt something shift. The quiet warmth in his eyes was everything I needed, everything I had been missing. It wasn't about rushing forward or pushing through the pain of the past. It was about taking it one step at a time together. And as the night wore on, I felt the final remnants of my past with Eric slip away. I was no longer looking back. I had made my choice. I was moving forward with Ethan, and that was enough. Tomorrow would be a new day, a new chapter. And this time, I wasn't afraid to turn the page. It wasn't long before the news of my marriage to Ethan reached Eric. I didn't know how, or when, or from whom, but I could feel the shift in the air. The tension that had been hanging over me ever since the day I walked out on the wedding with him began to thicken again, like a storm cloud gathering in the distance. I was sitting in the living room of Ethan's home one quiet evening, my feet tucked up underneath me on the couch, when I heard the doorbell ring. I had been lost in a book, a soft smile playing on my lips as I felt the calmness of the past few days wrapping around me like a warm blanket. Ethan's voice was low but firm as he answered the door. I didn't immediately pay attention. It was only when I heard the sharp edge of his tone that I glanced up, sensing something different in the way he was speaking. "Eric," Ethan said, the name sharp like a blade. "I've told you. Stay away from Elisa." I could hear Eric's voice then, low and insistent. "She's my fiancé. She's supposed to be with me. You don't know what she's going through." I felt my heart tighten at the sound of his voice, even after everything. But this time, it didn't sting with longing. It was a distant echo of a past that I was done with. Ethan's voice was unwavering. "No, Eric. She made her choice. And she's happy with me. You have no place here anymore. Not in her life, and certainly not in mine." There was a pause, and then a beat of silence before I heard Eric's voice crack with emotion. "She's just doing this out of spite. You don't know what she's really feeling. She'll come back to me. She'll realize she made a mistake." I could see the flash of anger in Ethan's eyes as he stepped away from the door, his face hard and determined. He walked back into the living room and faced me, his eyes searching mine for reassurance. "I won't let him hurt you, Elisa. You're safe here. With me," he said, his voice a soothing promise that made my chest ache with gratitude. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak for a moment. There was something about the way Ethan looked at me, the quiet strength he exuded, that made me realize just how different this was. How right it felt. Eric's words, his voice, they no longer held the power to sway me, to pull me back into that cycle of doubt and insecurity. "I know," I said softly, finally meeting his gaze. "I'm not going back to him. Not after everything." Ethan's lips quirked into a small smile, and there was tenderness in the way he reached for my hand. "You don't have to. I've got you." The days that followed felt like a slow dance, not rushed, not forced, but steady and natural. Ethan and I didn't try to rush into anything. We didn't talk about love in grand declarations or make promises that might feel too heavy too soon. Instead, we focused on building something real. We spent time together, taking long walks in the gardens, sharing quiet dinners, and talking about everything and nothing at once. Each day, I felt myself opening up a little more. Ethan's respect for me, his steady presence, his quiet kindness, allowed me to heal in ways I hadn't even known I needed. I didn't feel pressured to rush into love with him. There was no need to rush because I knew, deep down, that something was growing between us. Something slow, steady, and sure. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast a golden glow across the living room, I found myself laughing at something Ethan had said. I glanced over at him, his profile soft in the fading light. And in that moment, I realized that my heart was no longer guarded. It wasn't filled with the anger or confusion I had once carried. It wasn't haunted by Eric's ghost anymore. Instead, it was just open to what was here with Ethan. And I wasn't afraid of that. Ethan turned to me, his dark eyes searching mine with a quiet curiosity. You know, he said softly, I'm not trying to push you into anything. I know this is all new. But I like being with you, Elisa. More than I expected. I smiled, my heart light. I like being with you too, Ethan. I didn't know how much I needed this. Something simple, something real. No drama, no games. Just us. His lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. Good. Because I'm in no rush, Elisa. I'm happy just being with you. It was a soft admission, but it meant the world. In a world that had been so messy, so complicated, with people pulling me in every direction, Ethan's simple honesty and patience felt like a balm to my soul. The following weekend, I received a message from Eric. His words were a mix of pleading and frustration, but there was an underlying tone that I couldn't ignore: jealousy, possessiveness, a need to get me back. He begged me to talk to him, to meet him, to give him one last chance. I didn't respond right away. The idea of seeing him again, of hearing him ask for what I had already left behind, felt strange. I was done. I had moved on. But then, late one night, I received a call. It was Eric again. I don't understand, Elisa. You don't just throw away everything we had, he said, his voice tense with frustration. You can't be serious about him. About Ethan. I let his words hang in the air for a moment before I spoke, my voice clear and firm. Eric, it's over. It was over the moment you chose someone else. I'm not going back to you. I'm not going to be the person you want me to be anymore. I'm with Ethan. And that's where I'm staying. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. And when Eric spoke again, his voice was laced with bitterness. You'll regret this, Elisa. He's not the one you're meant to be with. I am. But I was done. I hung up the phone, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Ethan had never once tried to force me into this new relationship. He hadn't pushed for my love or made any demands. All he had ever done was respect me. And that respect was enough to build something solid, something real. Over the next few weeks, my connection with Ethan deepened. It was slow, gentle, not the fire and passion I had once hoped for with Eric, but something quieter, something steadier. Each day, I found myself trusting him more, feeling more at ease in his presence. He was a constant, unwavering in his affection. I wasn't afraid of being loved by him because his love was calm, accepting, and patient. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, a movie playing softly in the background, I felt Ethan's hand brushed against mine. Without a word, he intertwined his fingers with mine, his touch warm and secure. I leaned into him, this simple gesture filling me with a sense of peace that I hadn't known in so long. And as I rested my head on his shoulder, I realized that love didn't need to be a dramatic, all-consuming force. It didn't need to be rushed or forced. Love could grow slowly, like a flower blooming in its own time. With Ethan, I was learning that love could be steady, it could be gentle, and it could be exactly what I needed. And, for the first time in a long time, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. 6 months had passed since I made the decision to marry Ethan. And in those 6 months, something had shifted inside me, something I hadn't expected. I had started to find my footing again, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was no longer just surviving, but living. Ethan had become my anchor, my source of calm. There was no pressure, no rush, just a steady, unfolding love. I no longer craved the chaos of my past. I was content, at peace. But even in this quiet contentment, the shadows of the past still lingered. Eric had made no attempt to contact me directly for the first few months, but I knew that he was keeping tabs from a distance. Every now and then, I'd hear rumors, small whispers from mutual friends, from acquaintances who had once been in our circle, that Eric was still with Sarah. He was still holding on to her, even though he'd come to regret how everything had turned out between us. The news of Sarah's return to his life had been a surprise at first, but it didn't take long for me to realize what was really happening. Eric was torn, caught between the familiarity of someone who had once loved him and the weight of his regret over how he'd treated me. But it was never quite that simple. Even though he was with Sarah, I could tell he still wasn't over me. He'd been trying to win me back, sending me messages, showing up at places I frequented, trying to find ways to get my attention. But every time I saw him, I could see the pain in his eyes and the confusion. His words were laced with that old familiarity, a desperate longing that didn't quite seem to match up with his current life. One day, after another one of his attempts to approach me at a mutual gathering, I found myself sitting down with Ethan, my hands resting on my lap. He had been watching me carefully for days now, sensing the storm in my thoughts even before I could express them. "Do you think he'll ever stop trying to get you back?" Ethan asked softly, his eyes steady on mine. I sighed, leaning back in the chair, feeling the weight of the question sink into my bones. "I don't know. Maybe. But I don't want him back, Ethan. I'm not going back to that. I'm not going to let him drag me into his confusion again." Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable, but I could see the quiet storm behind his eyes. "You don't have to. I won't let him. Not while I'm here." I reached out and took his hand, the simple act grounding me. Ethan wasn't just a presence in my life. He was my partner, my protector. He never made me feel like I had to choose between him and the past. With him, I was whole, and that was enough. It wasn't until another few weeks passed that the cracks in Eric and Sarah's relationship began to show. The first sign was subtle, a disagreement here, a moment of tension there. But as time wore on, it became impossible to ignore. Sarah's true colors started to bleed through. The sweet, innocent persona she had once worn like a mask was slowly falling away, revealing the manipulative, opportunistic woman beneath. It wasn't that I was surprised. In fact, in some ways, I had expected it. Sarah had always been after something more than just Eric. She had been in it for his wealth, his status. And now, with Eric's lingering feelings for me, she became increasingly possessive, trying to control him more, pulling him away from his friends, even from his own family. It didn't take long for Eric to start seeing it. The late nights, the coldness, the constant pressure from Sarah to make things official, to prove his commitment. But the truth was, Eric was starting to see the person he had fallen for wasn't the woman he thought she was. And then, the inevitable happened. One afternoon, I received a message from Eric. This time, it wasn't a simple plea for forgiveness or a request to talk. No, this message was different. It was filled with regret, frustration, and a hint of desperation. "Elisa, I see it now. I see how much I hurt you. How much I messed up. I've been a fool. I thought I wanted Sarah, but she's nothing like you. Nothing." The words, while filled with regret, didn't stir the familiar ache in my chest. They didn't pull me back into that old longing, that old pain. Instead, they only made me sad for him, for how much he had to lose, even as he realized it. When I saw him face to face a few days later, I could see the regret in his eyes, the rawness of it. "Elisa, I was wrong. I should have never let you go. Please, come back. I'll do anything. I'll make things right." I looked at him, my heart aching, but this time, it wasn't for the reasons I expected. It wasn't for the version of him I had once loved. It was for the man he had become, the man I had already outgrown. "I've moved on, Eric," I said softly, my voice steady, even if the words themselves cut through the air. "I'm with Ethan now. And I'm happy. More than I ever was with you." He looked at me like I had just ripped his heart out, and in that moment, I knew I had to be strong. I had to let go, for both of us. Life continued to unfold with Ethan and I in a quiet, steady rhythm. We spent more time together, creating a life that didn't rely on the shadows of the past. Each day, I felt more secure in my love for him and more content with the path we were walking together. Then came the moment that truly solidified everything. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Ethan pulled me into his arms, his hands warm on my waist. I've been thinking, he said softly, his voice full of warmth and a kind of cautious excitement. I looked up at him, waiting for him to continue. We've been through a lot, haven't we? He asked, his eyes filled with that steady gaze I had come to love. But I think it's time to take another step forward. Another step? I echoed, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest. Ethan smiled, his thumb brushing my cheek. I want us to build a family. I want to raise a child with you, Elisa. My heart stopped, and then, like a rush of warmth, it filled with joy. I didn't need to say anything. The look in my eyes said it all. And when I found out the next week that I was pregnant, it felt like everything had come full circle. I was finally free from the past, free from the pain, the regret, the longing, and now I had something real. Something solid. Eric's attempts to get me back became distant echoes. And while I still cared for him, for the man I had once loved, I was no longer the woman who had once been so lost in his world. I was someone new now. Someone who had found her place. And that place was with Ethan. The man who loved me for who I was, who had never tried to mold me into something I wasn't. The man who was now the father of my child. I had never imagined my life would turn out this way, but as I rested my hand on my growing belly, I realized I had everything I had ever wanted. And for the first time in my life, I was truly happy. Eric had lost his chance. And in the end, it was Ethan, the steady, patient man who had always seen me, who had won my heart. The news of my pregnancy spread quickly. It wasn't something we had planned to announce yet, but when Eric found out, it didn't matter. The moment he learned I was expecting Ethan's child, something in him snapped. I could feel the weight of his anger and regret bearing down on me as if he wanted to pull me back into his life, no matter the cost. It came in a message first, then a phone call, and before I knew it, Eric was standing on the doorstep of Ethan's house, his face twisted with frustration and desperation. Elisa, he spat my name as though it was a curse, his eyes wild. You can't just throw everything away, everything we had. We were meant to be together. You're carrying my child, Elisa. You can't leave me for him. I felt the bile rise in my throat. His child. The words echoed with a hollow, empty ring. The truth was, I knew deep down that my heart was no longer tied to him. My baby was Ethan's, and our love was real. You don't get to make those decisions anymore, Eric, I said, my voice steady and cold. You lost that right when you chose Sarah over me, when you treated me like I didn't matter. Ethan and I are building a life. And I'm happy. I'm finally happy. Eric's face twisted into a mask of fury. You're happy? With him? You're letting him raise my child. Ethan, who had been standing quietly beside me, stepped forward, his posture calm but firm. His presence alone was enough to send a warning that I didn't have to speak again. He took control, not with anger, but with an unshakable confidence that only made Eric's frustration grow. She is happy with me, Eric. Ethan's voice was calm but cut through the air like a blade. And you need to leave her alone. If you know what's good for you, you'll step away and let her live her life. Eric's eyes flicked between me and Ethan, and for a moment, I could see the rage in his eyes bubbling over. He took a step toward Ethan, his fists clenched, but Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he squared his shoulders, a silent challenge in the way he stood. You think you can just take her from me? Eric spat, his voice dripping with venom. I was the one who was supposed to be with her. I was the one she chose, and now you think you can just come in and... Enough. Ethan's voice was low, commanding. You had your chance, Eric. And you blew it. Leave. Now. There was a tense silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then, like a storm that had finally run out of rage, Eric took a step back, his shoulders heaving. You'll regret this, Elisa, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes flicked to Ethan, his expression cold and defiant. You'll both regret this. I'll make sure of it. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed off, leaving behind the echoes of his anger and regret. I stood there for a moment, my heart racing, but the fear and uncertainty I once had seemed so distant now. As I looked up at Ethan, I saw the calm certainty in his eyes, and it was like a weight had been lifted from my chest. "It's over," I whispered. Ethan reached out, pulling me into a gentle embrace. "It's been over for a long time, Elisa. Don't let him get in your head again." We stood there for a moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the world outside us feeling like nothing more than a distant noise. I didn't need to worry about Eric anymore. I had everything I needed right here, in this moment, with Ethan. The days after Eric's visit were tense, but ultimately freeing. Eric didn't try to reach out again, not directly at least. But I could feel the simmering resentment in the air. He was angry. He was desperate. He was trying to make me second-guess everything I had chosen, but it was no use. I had made my decision. Sarah, meanwhile, was still trying to worm her way back into Eric's life. But he was no longer interested in her. In fact, Eric had begun to ignore her completely, leaving her calls unanswered, her messages unread. It wasn't long before Sarah, frustrated and angry, came to me with her own version of things. "You don't understand," Sarah hissed when she caught me in town one day. "Eric needs me. He don't like you. He's not going to be with you forever. You're just playing at this, Elisa. He's mine." Her words fell on deaf ears. I was done. There was nothing she could say to make me doubt myself, to make me go back to the chaos that had once been my life. Sarah wasn't after love. She was after control. And it had never been about Eric for me. It had always been about who I was with him, and that wasn't the person I wanted to be anymore. I shook my head, turning away from her. "Eric doesn't want you. Not anymore. And honestly, neither do I." Ethan and I settled into a quiet life. As my pregnancy progressed, we found ourselves falling deeper into the rhythm of our own love story. He was kind, attentive, and always there for me. We made plans, not just for the baby, but for our life together. Eric's attempts to pull me back into his orbit were long gone, and with every passing day, my resolve grew stronger. The past was just that, the past. I had a new life now. A better life. A life where I was loved and cherished in ways I never could have imagined. And as the months went by, I felt a peace settle in my heart. I was no longer torn between two worlds. I had chosen Ethan. And he had chosen me. When our son was born, it felt like everything had come full circle. The pain of the past, the fear and the uncertainty, it all melted away in the warmth of his tiny body in my arms, in the soft, steady presence of Ethan by my side. We had everything we needed, and we were exactly where we were meant. And yet, there was a sense of inevitability to it all. Everything had unfolded the way it was meant to. The past, with all its pain and heartache, had paved the way for something better. The last time I saw Sarah, she was standing in front of a small, rundown apartment complex, her clothes worn, her expression hard. The woman who had once thought she could outsmart everyone, the woman who had believed she could secure her place in a world of wealth and power, now found herself struggling to keep her head above water. Sarah had spent years scheming, maneuvering through relationships and promises, thinking she could use others for her own gain. But in the end, it had all caught up with her. Eric had moved on, his life continuing without her, and Sarah had found herself alone, abandoned by the very people she had once used. She hadn't anticipated that her manipulations would eventually turn her into the one who was left behind. She wasn't the woman she had once pretended to be. Alone, with few friends and even fewer prospects, Sarah's life had become a lonely cycle of missed opportunities and empty promises. Her ambitions had dried up. The wealthy men she had once tried to manipulate no longer took her seriously. She had lost Eric, and everything that had once seemed so important to her. And now she was just struggling, a shadow of the woman she had once imagined herself to be. Here Eric's success had never been in question. He had risen through the ranks of his family's business with a kind of determination that only someone who had lost something truly important could muster. The world saw him as a man who had everything: wealth, status, connections. He was admired in his field, respected by colleagues and associates alike. His career was flourishing, but his heart was not. At night, when the office lights dimmed, when the crowd of well-wishers had dispersed, Eric was left in the emptiness of his penthouse, alone with his thoughts. The house was grand, but the silence was deafening. He'd built his life around achievements, but it had all felt hollow, without someone to share it with. He had succeeded in every way that mattered to the world, but his heart still ached with the regret of losing me, of losing us. Every so often, he would hear a name, mine or Ethan's, and his thoughts would wander to what could have been. The love we had shared, the family we could have built. But it was too late. I had moved on, and Eric's life had become a lonely pursuit of accolades that meant nothing without someone to celebrate them with. He'd never been able to let go of the past. He was forever haunted by the image of a woman he had once taken for granted, the woman who had walked away from him, never to return. Ethan and I had found our place. We had built a life together, one filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Our family had grown. Our son, now 4, had the brightest smile and a mischievous twinkle in his eye, the perfect mix of Ethan's determination and my quiet strength. And then, there was our daughter, a year younger, whose laughter filled the house like music. She had Ethan's charm and my stubbornness. The house was always full of life, of noise, of the little moments that made everything worth it. Ethan and I had learned to navigate this world together, no longer as two broken souls, but as partners, as parents, as a family. As I watched Ethan play with our children in the backyard one evening, I couldn't help but think about how different my life had turned out. I had once been so lost, so caught up in the chaos of trying to find something that would make me whole. And then I had found Ethan, not because he was a solution, but because he was my equal, my counterpart. I walked up behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist, as we watched the children chase each other in the fading light. "You know," I said softly, "I never thought life would turn out like this." He smiled, leaning back into me, his arms going around me. "You and me both. But I wouldn't change a thing. Neither would I, because for the first time in my life, I had everything I had ever wanted. The past had shaped us all, for better or for worse. But where Sarah had been left behind, where Eric had remained haunted by his mistakes, Ethan and I had found a future we had built together. And as I held our children close, watching them grow, I knew that this was everything I had ever needed. No more longing for something that wasn't meant to be. No more chasing after a dream that had already passed me by. I had everything I had always wanted. And for the first time, everything was right.